Do you find it hard to explain to friends and family what you now do? Are you wasting valuable time by attempting to figure out challenges on your own? We have created a community for ex-corporate people running their own business who want to live a life they love whilst giving back to their community. This is the Build, Live, Give show. We bring you first-hand experiences of guests going through many of the struggles you face each and every day. We get real with no corporate BS. And now your host, Paul Higgins.
Welcome to the Build, Live, Give podcast, episode number 4. Hi, I'm Paul Higgins and I'm your host. And today we're really honored to have a great guest, Anfernee Chansamooth. Anthony, or I'll better call him Anf through the podcast, is really great at writing content. So today what he's going to do is give you a masterclass on how to write content. I know this is a real pain point for a lot of you BLG listeners, so you'll get lots of value out of this. And he'll also talk about how many posts you need to rank well in Google. And believe me, that number really surprised me. He also talks about his approach to business, which is really about a connector. And he's got a lovely backstory that goes back to Laos, where he was born, and just how he found that and how it made him better understand of what such a great connector he is. He'll also elaborate on some of his favorite collaboration tools, and also he's a bit of a podcast junkie like myself. So, get your pens and paper ready, because he really does drop a lot of value in here and gives you some really good actionable items. And on the community in total, it's growing. We're getting more and more downloads, and it's great to see those 5-star reviews coming through. So if you love the show, please leave a 5-star review so that we can start to spread the word and really start to build this community for people that are ex-corporate, looking to build their own business, live a great lifestyle, and give back to the community. And you can find out more at buildlivegive.com, and you can also see how you can get access to our free Facebook group. So what I'll do now is hand you over to Anfernee and hear more about his story.
Welcome, Anfernee Chansamooth, owner of Simple Creative Marketing, to the Build, Live, Give podcast. We'll get to know a lot more about you as you answer the questions, but what I'd love you to do is just start off with your brief journey and how you got to where you are today.
Sure, Paul. Thanks. I'm glad to be here. I'll try and make it brief. It's 38 years of my life.
But I think I counted 18 roles on your LinkedIn profile. So
yeah, there you go. Extensive. And they're the ones that I actually put on there. So, it was essentially, I came from professionally, I came from a corporate background. I spent about close to a decade working for HP, Hewlett Packard, global printing company and an IT company. And I went to, if I go back to school, went to university, was the first person in my family to go to uni and graduate. Sydney, it was University of Western Sydney, Campbelltown back then, and came out with an IT degree, Bachelor of Business actually, Computing Information Management. I went into the workforce. The year I graduated was the year that .com busted, and therefore there were a lot of internet marketing companies that went bust. And I spent a year trying to get a job because everyone was saying you need to have 5 years of experience and all kinds of things. And I said, well, how does a graduate do this? Long story short, ended up working for a couple of companies, then ended up at HP. Was there for close to 7 years. Worked my way through the ranks. Became the call center team leader at one point, managing a team of 10 staff here in Sydney. And then that entire team was offshored to India. And so I had the not so comfortable position of having to fire everyone on my team and then going to India to train everyone that was replacing them. And I learned a lot about globalization at that point in time, saw it firsthand. And I started to see what then would become the wave of outsourcing, which we now, it's very common nowadays to outsource work overseas. But back then that was very new. And I spent my time at HP. I moved from that role to becoming a global project manager, managing global teams in 3 locations across the world. So there was Costa Rica, China, Southeast Asia, and or what was called APJ, Asia Pacific, Japan, and certainly South Pacific, which is Australia, New Zealand. I was there for, and during that time was around 2005 was when I moved. I negotiated an opportunity to move overseas and work in Canada. The year prior to that was what was one of the biggest turning points in my life, which was when I actually contracted a bacterial infection in my brain, it's called cryptococcus, and that's basically I don't even know how you get it, but scientifically, what happens is it attacks your lungs first, and then it goes to your brain. And I was a fortunate person who didn't have the lung experience. It went straight to my brain, and there was a growth, it wasn't tumorous. What we discovered, it wasn't tumorous, but that forced me into hospital, 5-hour surgery, and then 2 months in hospital recovering from that. And that was one of the most challenging times of my life. And that's when I made the decision to pursue a more meaningful life and not spend 60 hours a week at work, making money that I couldn't spend because I was working too much, and putting my time and effort into helping people and also my family. And that's what led me to moving to Canada. That year that I was in Canada, I lost my job because the global financial crisis had hit, and then I started my first entrepreneurial venture, if you would call it that, by teaching salsa dancing out of my living room. Thanks to the support of one of my housemates at the time. We just turned our living room into a makeshift studio, and you should have seen it. It was just 4 of us moving furniture, like trying to get our furniture out of our living room into the kitchen, which wasn't actually the right space to put it in, but we did that, and people would come along and I'd teach them a bit of beginner salsa dancing, and that led to opportunities. And then eventually, at the same time, I was learning all about social media, which is what leads us to where we are today. Me leading a company that basically produces content. It's specifically content writing, article writing, and blog post writing. I have a team all over they're in South Africa, England, and the US, and they basically write for our clients, and then we help them get consistency in putting out content. So that kind of leads us where we are today. I hope that's short enough for you, Paul.
Yeah, no, look, that's a great summary and a really good story. As far as when you got the news that the role was going to be made redundant, what was your thinking at that time? If you can go back, were you thinking to go back and get another corporate job? I know you went down the salsa route and went down building your own business, but what was sort of your thinking at the time?
I was not looking. Well, at the time, I was looking for because I was working in project management in corporate. That's the only thing I knew, right? Before I went down the whole salsa route, that's all I knew. And I recall being at the time, it was heading into winter. If you're ever in Toronto in the winter, it's not a pleasurable experience. And so I was getting the physical shock of being in such a cold environment, but also the emotional shock of losing my job, and my sole source of income. So I was looking for. At the time, I was actually quite. I had optimism, and I was already looking forward to the change, in the sense that maybe 3 months prior, I felt internally that my time as in that company was coming to a close. But I was prepared for that news. I actually expected it to happen in August, but the news came to me in February, which was the shock for me, because I wasn't prepared my planning didn't take into account, well, what happens if they let me go earlier. But I knew that the culture fit wasn't right for me, and what I really was looking for, more so than it being a corporate job, was what was the right culture fit for where I was at with my life. And I looked around in well, the equivalent of Seek, .com over there in Canada. I can't remember the name now, but the issue I had was that the visa I had at the time was tied to the company that had sponsored me to go over there. And I actually couldn't go and apply to work for anyone else. And so that's what forced my hand to go down the more creative path of trying to work out, well, how can I pay my rent and my groceries without having, being able to get employed by another company, right? And there was also the HP itself. They have a policy: if you are made redundant, you cannot be hired within the company for another 6 months, I believe. So even if there were positions available in the company, I was not able to go and get hired, in those other departments.
Great. And you've sort of touched on them, but what were some of your greatest fears at that point when you were sort of starting your entrepreneurial journey?
Really just the uncertainty around, I had a constant stream of income. I knew when the paycheck was coming in, that would hit the account. I had obviously, things to pay off. At the time, I had a mortgage back in Australia, and I had other considerations, my rents, my grocery bills and whatnot. And I'm a big travel fan. Like a lot of us, I love to travel. And one of the reasons I was over there was because I wanted to explore North America. And so any opportunity I could get to travel around Canada, I would. And those sort of financial considerations needed to be taken into account. And the fears that came up were around that. Well, how can I actually, afford to have the lifestyle that I was living, when I don't have a regular income stream? And I'd also, because I was living with 3 other people, I didn't want to put them out by being, by leaving and saying, I need to downgrade or whatever it is, because I don't have a job, right? So I had to find it actually forced me to get more creative in the way I was thinking. And fortunately, I was, like I mentioned earlier, one of the housemates I was living with is quite entrepreneurial. And she was the one who gave me the idea around, teaching classes and that as a possible income stream. I will also say that I did go look for other jobs, and I ended up doing all kinds of, I don't know what to call them, but part-time gigs. In Toronto, I was handing out newspapers 6 a.m. in the morning every day, for a local newspaper. I did that for a while. Learned that I really suck at listening to authority. And just got into a really bizarre moment, but I got into a bit of a dispute with my manager at the time because of what the short style I was wearing. It didn't fit the color profile that they wanted, and they got upset, and I got upset, and I just realized, if I can't, agree to a color of clothing with somebody, this is an issue, and probably I need to work for myself. And that's kind of one of the experiences I had over there.
Great. So other than your flatmate at the time, what other help did you receive? Who else did you get advice and help from?
So one of the things that was happening during that time, I'm not sure if our listeners are familiar with this, but there was a website and a community called Couchsurfing. And this is the predecessor to Airbnb. Right now, Couchsurfing was basically an online forum for travelers and people who wanted to really have an experience of exchanging cultures, and it was really grounded on the philosophy of kindness, and that you would, if you had a space or a couch, that you would host people who would come into your city, and if you were to go to traveling, then you could be what's called a surfer, and you literally could surf, on different people's couches or living rooms or whatnot, spare bedrooms, and it was all free. There was no costs involved in that. I was a local ambassador in Toronto, so that meant that I actually held weekly meetups down at the local pub, and people would come, and I'd host anything from 5 to during the summer 50 people in a pub, and facilitate introductions, and it was it's networking. We know that as networking in the business world, but it was like-minded people coming together and building community, and that was beautiful. And during my stint, I actually hosted over 60 strangers in my living room on my couch. I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment at the time, and that, and I met entrepreneurs through that. Some of the people that came through were, these creative-minded people who had launched, their own businesses and were doing different things. And I was exposed to this world. It's like, wow, what's going on with this? And I mentioned my housemate was also entrepreneurial. She still does this. She still works as a freelance translator. She speaks 8 different languages. And so that was, the support network, but I also went out looking for support. So at the time, Toronto had, was still there, but now it's expanded. One of the first co-working spaces that that ever existed, which is called the Center of Social Innovation, and it's an amazing space. And you go in there, and you're surrounded by anything up to like 100 different entrepreneurs and business owners who are creating social impact businesses, and that was just tremendous for me, because I was exposed to this idea of what you've got now, which is build, live, give, because this is what these people were doing, right? They were building impact businesses that were making a social impact, and making it profitable at the same time, right? And so I spent a lot of time, in there. Like, I wasn't an official member. I never paid for a membership, but I would just hang out in the lobby or in a cafe downstairs, and I would just meet and talk to some of these members, go along to some of the events. I ended up teaching salsa there as well to some of those residents. And that was an amazing time. I looked for connection. Remember, I said I was looking for culture when I lost my job, and that's where I found that culture. It was a culture of social entrepreneurism, and that and I met some of the influencers and leaders at the time. I then joined a nonprofit, a team of there were 5. I'll call them kids, but they were young adults who had just graduated from university, and they created a nonprofit to support young social entrepreneurs of Canada, and that was the name of the actual company. And I came on board as the social media marketing person on their team, and I helped them put together a 200-person event, which was their first inaugural event, to really unite all these social entrepreneurs across Canada and the region. And we were able to pull some big names in the space and have them be, key speakers and whatnot. I think we did it in under 5 months, which was quite an intensive schedule, but we made it happen. We filled it up, got some great media exposure to it, even to the point where it was, people were starting to look at Toronto then as almost with the same light as New York or San Francisco. Obviously, we're familiar with Bay Area and Silicon Valley, but at the time, looking at Toronto as probably the next hub for social entrepreneurism, which was great, which is what we wanted, because we wanted to put that place on the map. And through that, I met different people, different business owners and whatnot, and I got mentorship from some of the advisors that were in the space. And that's the path that led me down to a project, which eventually I launched a few years later in Laos, which was called Design for Change Laos, and that was basically a program to help kids, students, or young kids, really become empowered and learn about community engagement and learn. The key message was that when adults and when kids understand and believe the words "I can," and believe in themselves, and adults support them in that belief, that they can literally change the world and change their communities. And it was such a great project to work on. And I ran that for a year when I was living in Laos in 2009. So, yeah, long story, but
look, it's a great story, and it's I hope the listeners are getting the worldly experience I am by listening to you. And my question to you is sort of this nature nurture thing. So, I've worked with you on a day-to-day basis now, and I've never met anyone, or I've met very few people like you that just generally help and connect people. I think, you're an amazing connector, and you've done it several times for me, and it's been very beneficial, and it's a fantastic gift. And for me, I just wonder, is it in your nature, you're always like that, or because of this great background that you've just been talking through, was it, nurtured through that environment? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you've ever read the book, called The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. He mentions 3 archetypes, and there's the salesperson, which is a natural person who can go up there and sell it, sell ice to the Eskimos. You've got the maven, which is a person who is just the knowledge center. They know everything about their specific niche or the specific industry. Or, think about your friend who, if you want to buy clothes, that's the one you're going to call up and go, hey, give me some advice on what brand I should get, or what style should work for me. They're usually the fashion gurus, or they're the ones who just have all the knowledge. Like you, Paul, you have all the knowledge of systems. You understand, this is what you should use and what tools are there and whatnot. Then the third type of person, the third archetype, is the connector. Which is a person who really just, for whatever reason, just knows everybody. And it's a natural thing. When I say it's natural, it takes work. And I have always had it. I was the kid in kindergarten, and I remember that, my first ever kindergarten report card, said, he, good grades, but he's disrupting the class because he just can't stop talking to everybody, right? And that's, for whatever reason, I was always thrust into that leadership role. People would come to me, and I learned later on. This is in 2009 when I went to Laos with my auntie for the first time, since I was born there, and I went back, and I learned through her that a few generations before us, my great grandfather was the village chief of our village, right? So that was, I've seen that with my dad. I've seen it with my mum and my auntie. These people are just natural connectors. Like people in the Lao community here in Sydney, and also in Laos, they just know who these people are. And I asked her that question. I said, why is it like I walk into the village? I haven't been there for 37 years. And we have this, it's a welcoming ceremony that we did in the village, in our family's house. And the whole community, the whole village came to see us. And I said, how come they all know us? And my auntie said, well, that's because our family, because our great grandfather was the chief of this village, and everyone knows and pays respect to that. And you're one of the descendants, right? Which was a huge, for me, it was massive. We consider this whole movement right now around tribes and forming your tribe and connecting to your tribe, and and building your community and these sort of things. It's like, oh my gosh, that's already been embedded in my DNA. And just going through my life, I've always been that person that would connect people. And my challenge was a few years ago was, particularly when I was losing my job, I was trying to work out, well, I do this thing naturally. I always connect people, but I couldn't work out how do I actually, I'm almost ashamed to say it, but how do I monetize it? How do I actually turn that into making a living from it, right? Because I couldn't think of a way that could be done. And there are referral networks and these sort of things, but I didn't know how to use those and whatnot. But when I connect people, I generally do it because I see that there's mutual benefit, and not even taking myself into the equation. It's more like, it's great to introduce Paul to this person because because of the projects they're working on and the values that they have. And I'm always looking at that. So when I meet someone, I'm always asking within the first couple of questions, what their values are. Right now, I'm trying to ascertain and determine that, because my internal radar and also my internal memory system will record that. And what I look for and record most is, okay, well, Paul's all about this build, lift, give thing. Who else is about that I can connect, him to? And that's just something that I've always had. But I really, in the last 5-6 years, really works on being more conscious and deliberate about that, and really, really coming from this place of, well, how can I serve people, more better, and how can I make great connections and not just, connect for the sake of connecting. But that's just something that's something I've developed over time.
Yeah, no, and like I said, you do it brilliantly. So if you sort of fast forward through to today, you walk into a co-working space or into a networking event, And someone says, so, what do you do, Anf? How do you answer that question?
So basically what I would say is that I help entrepreneurs and small business owners who a bit time challenged or time poor to really get consistent with putting their message out there so that they can connect with their target audience, and also grow their brand, and we do that through multiple ways, through writing their content for them. That's one way. Researching, writing, turning that into content, blog posts, articles, case studies, whatnot. That's one way. We also create and produce podcasts for our clients. That's another way. And even before all of that, we also do, I do a content marketing strategy session, and really help people get clear on why even use content and what's the right medium for them, because I think that's one of the challenges. Is there's just so much, there's so many tools and platforms out there, and we can get overwhelmed very quickly if we try and do everything at once, and you really don't need to. It's more about finding the right channel and medium for yourself, but also for your client, your potential clientele. It's you got to find that match, because if you're putting out podcasts and your audience don't listen to podcasts and they prefer to read blog posts, you've got to disconnect. All right, so that's probably what I'd say. I'd say I'm a almost a serial entrepreneur, but I also it kind of depends on who I'm talking to. But I also have sometimes I say I'm a social entrepreneur or a change maker, because for me it's actually the types of businesses that I work with are ones like yours, Paul, who have more a social mission, as opposed to just generally profit making. And I'm looking for, like I said, I want it to live a life that's meaningful, and that means working with organizations and people that are also striving to make our world a better place. As idealistic as that is, that's really what it's all about for me, and now even more so about a lot of the entrepreneurs I work with are also looking at freedom, what's called the freedom business or the freedom lifestyle, where they create business is just an avenue to make impact, but also give them and their families the freedom that they're wanting in their lives. And that could be freedom of choice, that could be freedom of time, money, whatever it may be. And that's something that I'm building for myself and also my partner, my fiance. We're getting, and also soon down the line, we want to have a family as well.
Great. And what are some of the biggest challenges that you face with doing what you've just articulated?
Well, some of the challenges are there around the competitiveness of the industry. You can, there are platforms out there like Fiverr and Upwork and whatever else, and any, Airtasker, any of these platforms out there where you could literally just go on this website and do search for copywriters, content writers, blog post writers, whatever it may be, at a very low price point. And that's become more mainstream, if you will, over the last few years. And the trend now is the freelance economy has really taken off. And so there's a lot of choice, right? And that's part of the problem is, well, how do you find a quality supplier who can actually deliver quality work? And you got to take into account, if you're using someone through Fiverr, that there have been cases of people who plagiarize, work and whatever else, and you can get into legal troubles. So the challenge that I've had particularly in our business is positioning, in terms of, we're not your cheapest option, because we're actually quite stringent on our quality process, and we want to produce quality work. And one of the challenges and objections that business owners have is around outsourcing their content, is that they're concerned about losing their voice, their tone of voice, and their message, and their personality and tone, if you will. And so we work I work one-on-one with the entrepreneur on making sure that we get that right, because if we don't get that right, then we're producing work that will never be used, and we want our work to be out there, because that gives our writers, their purpose, because they're here to write. They love writing, and they love the challenge of actually learning about a brand or a distinct tone and style, and then being able to convey that. And so my role in this business is to be the bridge, if you will, and to really work with the client to understand, well, what's your business really about, and who you're talking to, and what's your tone. Is it professional, is it corporate, is it whatever it may be, and then we work through that, and then take what I feel is a much deeper process, and that because of that, there's more cost associated with that. But we want to get that right, and we want to make sure that we're serving our clients the best way we can.
Yeah, and look, I speak to a lot of the BLG community, and content is one of the biggest things they struggle with, including myself. Balancing that. How do you get your message out there and get cut through the noise? Because there is so much noise these days with the prevalence of social media and other mediums. We've probably been bombarded with more information than ever. But how do you do it? And I know from my personal experience, working with you and your team has been great, because you've made it easier for me to get my voice out there. So I still feel it's me, but it's actually allowed me to not sit on a post for months or be irregular with my posting. So I think the service that you provide our community, and particularly my own business, has been fantastic. And through the journey, you've obviously received some great advice on how you break that difference between the really good quality like yourself and some of the freelancers that are undercutting the market and basically devaluing the market. What sort of your best advice you've received on how to tackle that?
Yeah, it's around really getting clear on why content is important. I think let's start there, and there, I'm putting together some talks that I'm going to go out and do in some co-working spaces shortly around really the benefit of content marketing. What is it? There's a lot of noise around that. I know a lot of people, or I know people who follow, for example, Gary Vaynerchuk, who's a social media influencer. Brilliant guy. I believe he's a brilliant guy. But the way he does content is not going to be how everyone else does content. And one of the, coming back to challenges, is just the expectation around how content can work for you. And for some people, they're looking for a quick win. They're looking for quick results, because we are in this world of, MTV generation, whatever you want to call it, and let's make everything fast. But the problem is that we work more, on a long-term or mid to long-term strategy, and we look at, well, actually, if you can build your content library up, and up to, I think the last Google report that I read said something around, you need like 300 blog posts or articles on your site for it to really start to rank well, and to get the social, the search engine optimized benefits of that. And most blogs don't even have close to 50 articles, right? So it's really about, I'm talking about quantity here, but even that quantity needs to be quality, right? You need to be writing, your posts need to be formatted in the right way. They need to be search engine optimized. There's a strong relationship between understanding SEO and using keywords that your audience are looking for, what they're searching for, making sure you put those and embed those into your blog content and your articles and whatever's on your site. And so you need to write with that in mind as well. It's not just about, you have a spark of inspiration and you go and write, a 1,200 word blog post. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm saying that they have its place, but you need to understand the context in which your content's being used, right? And something that you're doing really quite well is you also combine video content with audio content, such as this podcast. You're also using text, obviously the written stuff that we work on with you, and that's really where it's got to be. That's where it's moving. Like you need to be able to tackle multiple learning styles, right? And so for those of us who understand that, your audience, some people like to read, some people like to listen, some people want to, like me, when I go for a run or ride my bike, I'm listening to podcasts, and both you and I are podcast geeks, and we consume them like crazy. So you want to make sure that you have, the right content for the right time, for the right place, for where your audience are going to be. And that's really coming back to the idea of, you've got to have a plan, you've got to have a strategy, and don't just go create things willy-nilly. I mean, yes, you can test a whole bunch of things, but learn from my experience and my clients' experience of just, putting stuff out there and going, oh, why aren't I getting cut through? Why isn't it making any waves, right? But it's because you're building over time. You're building a collection of work that it stands you in good stead. Because, just to give you a simple example, if you're looking for a plumber and you went to 2 different or 3 different plumbing websites, because you searched plumber, Melbourne, right, in Google, and you came up with 3 websites, and you went and checked those out. And here's a tip: most people don't go past page 1 on Google search. So when the results come up, if you're not in those top 10 rankings, it's not many people will go past that. Something like 90-something% will never go past page 1. And so if you click through and you're looking at these 3 different plumbers, and you find the first one, their last blog update was 6 months ago, right? Versus the other guy who's done, he's done a weekly post for the last 6 months, and someone else who's maybe hasn't done anything for 2 years. Who are you going to go with? Who do you, like, in your mind, who do you think is going to be more relevant? Who's more updated with the industry? Who knows what's going on, right? And so, rightly or wrongly, that's just how we work. Right, that's how minds think. Right, we want we want relevancy, we want expertise. Right, and so if your content demonstrates that and answers a lot of questions that are in your prospects' minds, then you're well on your way. Okay, and that's why we actually work on building over time that volume of content. Right, so something just for people listening to this to think about is, well, what's on there, and is it really high quality? Right, because high quality means that the better quality your blog posts or articles are, the more time people will spend on your site. Google loves that, and what happens is Google pushes your rankings up. Okay, because they're saying there's relevance here. Now, if you also have links coming in from other people who are linking to some of your articles and whatnot from what are called authority sites. So if you have a local government institution or whatever it is, and they, for whatever reason, you've created the guide to transitioning from corporate to entrepreneurship or whatever it may be, and that's the ultimate guide, and then you have all these sites like Seek and whatever, some of these job market sites linking to you, and they're getting high volume. Google looks at it and goes, well, if this these websites, high authority websites, are linking to this particular one website, that must mean that there's some relevance there for this market, and then they're going to push you up higher again. So there's just a bit of insight there for you around how that all works. But our team, that's a lot of my what we'll call spare time is researching and understanding how that all works. So that way we can deliver that and help our clients produce content that really works for them and their audience.
Great. And look, that's a masterclass on content there. But if I look back when you're at HP or when you're in corporate, I don't know if you ever would get lost in the focus of, passionately talking about what you do. But certainly, for listeners, that was a masterclass. But it's just so great to hear your passion and to have someone doing what they love. And I suppose that's what BLG communities are all about. I'll just shift gears now into the give component. So, what a cause or community are you passionate about, and why?
There are 2 that sort of stand out for me. One is the entrepreneur startup community. So I spend a lot of time, I work out of a co-working space, which is the space I used to work for as an employee. But I sort of bounce around different co-working spaces. I love the energy that comes from people with big ideas, and particularly what I love about Hub or Hub Australia is the brand, is that they attract a lot of these social entrepreneurs and social impact businesses. So that's one area I love working in the entrepreneurship space, and that's I write about that stuff. I share some of the challenges and frustrations I've been through, and the other people are talking about. I've got my own podcast, which I've interviewed you, Paul, on, and that's going to come up soon. But that's really being able to unmask and unravel a lot of what I feel is the narrative that's not often spoken about, which are the real challenges and struggles that people go through to live their purpose. On the other side, that's one sort of group and community. The other group and community is I have a heart for children, specifically youth, and the most recent project I worked on, I think I did mention Design for Change Laos, and for me that's my way to give back to. I call it my country. I'm Australian as it can be, but certainly my family, my heritage come from that place, and I want to do more work there. And one of the ideas I've had is to sort of create some kind of fund or whatnot where it's quite difficult to go into a country like that. And implement change or to do anything that might be viewed as disrupting what the government's doing, right? And so someone smart suggested to me, well, why don't you create a fund of some sort where you can actually have youth or young leaders in the country be able to have scholarships where they can come out to Australia and different places and learn some of the things that are going on in these parts of the world, so then they can take that back into the country and then initiate change from within. And I think that's a beautiful way to do it. And so, a long way from getting there, but that's something that I'm working, that's in my mind, on the back of my mind. And another I'll add a third community that we're looking at is my partner is very passionate about sustainability and sustainable environment and communities. It's almost like sustainable community in a sense that we would have some kind of farmland or some kind of land where we produce food and whatever else, apply permaculture principles and what else, and would basically live off the land, if you will. But also she wants that to be a space where kids and whatever else, or orphans and people like that, can come along and they can be educated. They can feel like they belong. They can connect with the beautiful parts of humanity. And that's a longer 20-year sort of vision that we've got together. And we are sort of putting in the early stages of trying to map that out and see what that looks like. But that's coming back to the BLG formula. That's really what we're all about and what we're trying to build, certainly in this lifetime.
Excellent. That's fantastic. And then finally, we'll just do a quick series of questions to give some actionable and practical advice to the BLG community. So, what's one productivity tip that you would love to give listeners?
I'm gonna go with one that you gave me, which is to get onto this platform called Podio, and I've used a whole bunch of project management tools, and I was using Slack to have my team communicate as well, and whatever else. And when Paul introduced me to Podio, the platform, it kind of combines the best of all those different solutions, and I'm loving it. Like I've got a client that I work with now, and I've got them using it, and it's great because we can talk to their suppliers as well, and their suppliers use it, and it's just like a really nice solution for project management, keeping on track with all your tasks and your campaigns and your projects. We've built just like a whole section for content and all the ideas we have around what content needs to be produced, and it's a great way to be able to assign tasks and whatnot, and keep track of all the moving parts of building an organization, because they're a nonprofit as well. So yeah, my one tip for productivity is to get onto Podio.
Fantastic. And you said before you're a bit of a podcast junkie like myself. What if you had to list 3 podcasts that you recommend someone take a look at or listen, what would they be?
I'm just going to bring up my Stitcher right now and give you some ideas. I've got the Side Hustle Show. I'm a big fan of Nick Loper and what he's doing with that show. He's basically revealing, he's up to 217 episodes now, all about what's called the side hustle. Really, being able to build a living. What does this say? He says, 9 to 5, you build an income, but from the 6 to 2, whatever it is, you're building a life. That's kind of his tagline. And he just interviews all these amazing people who are doing some really great projects and making money on the side. And some of them become full-fledged businesses, but it's just the entrepreneurial spirit. I love it. Another one that I really I liked his interview style, and I like who he gets on his show. Is the Tim Ferriss show. The best one I would recommend is listen to Tim Ferriss interview Arnold Schwarzenegger. That just wow, like that one. He did a 2-part episode on that one, and who you think Arnold Schwarzenegger is, because you've seen him in a Terminator and everything else. Like, that's just scratching the surface. Like, this guy is really he's a saint. In what he does. And then a third one that I really quite like right now is called Marketing School, and that's a guy called Neil Patel and his buddy Eric Sue, and they're really short 7-minute episodes, and it's like everything that you need to know about marketing, and it's just a great one to whilst you're running, on the bike, driving, whatever it may be. It's just bite-sized, actionable content, and every time I listen to that, I've got a new thing that I need to implement. The problem is when you listen to too many of those episodes, you go, oh crap, like there's really 100 things I should be doing. But if you do want marketing tips, that's one I'd definitely recommend.
Brilliant. And there'll be links in the show notes to all of those great resources. So what's one piece of advice you wish you'd received when you first started your entrepreneurial journey?
One piece of advice, I would say that to really understand who you are and what you're really about and what you're not about, and spend time to connect with that, and find your inner voice, or your own voice and your own patterns and whatever else, and your beliefs and what you really care about, and really hone in on that. And this becomes the basis of what you might call your brand, but you live your brand, whether and brand is not what you say about yourself, it's what everyone else says about you when you're not there, right? And so it's you need to live that. There's a big movement right now around this authenticity idea, but that's just a reflection of the social media world that we're in, where everyone's putting up beautiful Instagram pictures and Facebook feed images and whatever else to show how great their life is, but they're not showing the other side of the challenge and the struggle. And so coming back to that one tip, I wish someone had said to me, early on, like even when I was in high school, that someone said to me, and go and think about what you really care about, what lights you up. And it's not about necessarily finding your passion, which can become a trap. It's more around finding what you're curious about, right? And explore those curiosities, because you never know where they will lead. And then connect with people who are also, have similar curiosities and interests, because they're the ones who become your support networks and your mentors, and they will lead you to the opportunities, and you need to obviously take those opportunities. But really understand self-awareness. Really take the time to do that. I know, Paul, you do a regular reflection on where you're at and what your life means to you and what's important to you, and that's something that I also do as well, and I do that with my fiance. So we're on the same page, because even as partners you can grow apart, and that's so important that where you stand in the world, and be okay with it changing too. Like over time, you grow and you evolve, and your beliefs can be challenged, and you learn different things. And who I thought I might have been when I was 21, like I'm 38 now, no way. If you had asked me this question when I was 21, that I would say this is the person I'd be when I'm 38. And so it's really all about finding your voice and who you are, and what you want what your life to mean. when it's all said and done.
Yeah, look, that's some brilliant advice, and I think that's sort of the theme that I've known you for, which is, you're always giving, and you're a very giving person. I think you've given some great advice, and also, the journey that you're on with your fiance and your 20-year vision is fantastic to hear. So, the last thing is, where can people find out more about you?
Yep, the most easy way is to go to simplecreativemarketing.com. That's one word, simplecreativemarketing.com, and you'll find all about me and my business and everything else there.
Excellent. And once again, all those links will be in the show notes. So, Anf, I'd love to thank you for sharing your journey with BLG listeners today, and we wish you every success in the future. And I feel very fortunate to be working with someone like yourself.
The respect is right here with you, Paul. I just love what you're at and what you're about. And BLG community is amazing. It's really strong and just amazing, loving people in there. And thank you for creating this platform and for connecting all of us.
Great. Thanks, Anne. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Build, Live, Give show. If you found this show helpful, please share it with others so we can build businesses, live great lives, and give back to the community. If you would like to join the BLG community, go to our website, www.buildlivegive.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.